Hello world! WayofTime here, bringing to you another episode of EEPower. Now for this episode, we're going to continue working on our quarry program and see how much more awesome we can get it to work as, or something along those lines. Anyways, what we're going to do is edit a new quarry program. So this is going to be quarry. Ooh, spooky music. Okay, so what we're going to do first is make some of the basic things we'll want this quarry to do. One of the main things is we'll want it to eventually dig down or check whether it needs to dig down and etc. But that's not the first thing we're going to need to do. We need to make sure that this will be able to dump its inventory when it reaches a certain point. So let's make a function, and we'll be very imaginative with this and have it basically sweep through its inventory and dump everything that's in it. So for I equals 1, since there's 16 slots, we'll do this, and what it'll do is it'll select the slot I, and then it'll drop all of it down like so. So I'll drop all of it in the chest that will be below it, and then it'll end that, and then just for simplicity, it'll put it back into slot 1 and then end. Oops. There we go. So I'm not even going to bother checking this, but another thing we're going to need to do is test the inventory to see whether it is full. So what this will do is it'll assume it starts at the first slot. As we know before, is something sneaking up behind me? No? Okay, as we know before, basically if stuff starts in the first slot, or if we select the first slot, it'll fill it, then it'll continue onwards, and eventually only slot 16 will be left for filling. So what we'll do is we'll select the last slot in it, and if there's a room left, so if we check the item count of it, and if it equals to 0, so if it's 0, then we'll return true, meaning that there is still room in its inventory. Otherwise, we will return false. And end that, and then to make life easy, select slot 1. Now, of course, we have made a bit of a typo there, but this is good. And then we'll end this madness. Save. Okay, this is saved to quarry. Now we have an ability to basically dump our inventory, and we have an ability to test our inventory. Okay, now that our easy stuff is done, we can go on with some of our more fun stuff. Okay, so basically we're going to have a bunch of global values. Well, global to this API, we can say. We're going to need to be able to specify the maximum quarry dimensions. We're also going to need to specify the current position in said quarry. We're going to need to specify where our chest is that all of our items are going to be dumped into, or if we eventually get red power, where our relay is, or ejector, whatever it is. And we're also going to need to put our last X location, X, Y, Z, and all that. Yes, sirree. Okay, so we'll worry about initializing those later, but if you've seen any of my mobile quarry, like Mark II onwards videos, you'll know that I have a set of algorithms that's able to make a well-defined quarry. So I'm going to actually try to explain them as much as possible, but I pretty much have the code already, and it's just pretty much a translation to Lua. So what I'm doing is making some sort of way so that it'll go right whenever it needs to. So function right. What this will do is basically it'll force its way to the right even if there's blocks in front of it. So first what it'll do though is detect if there's a block underneath it, and if there is, it'll dig down. This will allow it to efficiently continue quarrying. After that, basically it'll check if it can actually move in the -x direction. This is using our move API. And if it cannot, it will dig in front of it. And after that's all done, quarry X is basically its position in the quarry along its x-axis. We'll add 1 to that because it has successfully went, so think of the corner like this, it has successfully went 1 on its axis. So if you have like a 2x2 quarry, it'll start here, it'll dig, it'll then move over here, it'll dig, eventually it'll move upwards and dig and dig and dig and dig and dig as much as it possibly can. Mwahaha. And we'll end that. Now, we got that. This will be able to be used later, so let's go for a left. Left will pretty much be the exact same. So it'll detect down. And it is just now that I'm realizing grievous typos in my code, and it's annoying. Detect down, then, if it can, it'll dig. And then it'll continue trying to go in the positive x direction. And dig if it cannot. And finally, it will take 1 away from the quarry X position. Okay, saved. Now that we got those, we're going to have to be a little finicky. Try to follow along as best as you can. Basically, what we'll want to be able to do is we have a defined area. We define where we are going to dig and how many layers eventually. That's not where we are right now. What we need to do is program in logic so that when it starts here, it'll know that it'll start digging, then it needs to go right. Then a logic that'll say, hey, there's more that I need to go. I'll move and dig what's there. Then I'll know I need to go left. Then I need to go down and then go the other direction, continually mining down, down, down. And I think you got the picture. Dirt! Yay, I'm rich. As I proceed to fall down the hole. Anyways. So what we need to do is do a right test. Basically see how far I can go to the right. So, function right test. Okay, so basically this is where our test inventory comes into play as well. So we'll test our inventory. So if our test inventory returns true, and when our quarry X position is less than our maximum width of the quarry, we'll do the following. What we'll do is this. We'll continue to go right. And that's all. Pretty simple, right? Now let's do another function that goes in the other direction. Left test. Is it still daytime? It's still barely daytime. So, while test inv, and this time we have to check if it's big enough in the other direction. So if, say, this is 1 and this is 2, and the max is 2. So when it gets to 2, it can't go any farther. But when it gets to 1, it can't go any farther. Or you can think of it while it's greater than 1. We'll do the following, which is left. Now if this was fourth, it'd be much easier to test this because I could just do the words and it'd be all good. But seeing as this is Lua, that would take a lot more. So I'm just going to continue on to the forward and the backward tests. Basically, the forward test will detect whether it can go any more forward. And if it can, it will. If it can't, it will just finish its row, then do other stuff. I think I need to rest. So before we forget, we're going to need to do other things other than just going right and left. We need to be able to go forward and go backwards and also go down. So let's make functions for those. So we need to do a function for go forward, which will pretty much be the stuff that's up there. So if I can even scroll, which I can't really with the wheel, so I just have to do that. So basically it's the same thing. So if turtle.detect down, then it will turtle.dig down. And we'll add 1 to the quarry z-axis. And we'll end that. And now we need to do the next one, which is go back. Go back! Go back, Luke! You must go back! Sorry, I just showed my inner nerd a bit. Sorry for not warning you guys. It's, I'm kind of ashamed, actually. Speaking of which, hey, code problems! Now, you're probably wondering why I don't need a while loop to continue to dig down, because, well, you're not moving anywhere and you're digging down. So unless it's a cobble gen, there's no point. Which I could probably make a cobble gen, because that would be a good source of cobble, and I might need to cobble together some cobble at a later date. So that we'll have to see how that goes. Quarry z equals quarry z minus 1. Okay, and we'll end that. Now we just need to go down and then get that one done. And because of backwards programming logic on my part, I decided to have the quarry y, when it goes down, I'll add 1 to it instead of subtract. Because I am like that. Now, let's make our forward test and our backwards test. Forward test. As I said before, this function pretty much checks if it can continue forward or not. I see grass. It is pretty. Okay, so without some dawdling, let's see. Function forward test, what it needs to do is it needs to test if the inventory is full. Basically, this will tie in with like left.test or right.test. So it'll need to see if left.test was terminated either by the inventory being full or if it reached its position. If test in is true, then it means that it was killed by its position, um, basically reaching the end of the line. Therefore, it will have to test if it can move forward or not by doing something with the quarry Z position. So if the quarry Z is the same as our maximum length, what we'll do is we'll add another one to it. So if we ever happen to resume it, we won't just go through and do the check and say, hey, I'm at the maximum length, let's add another one, or go forward, or whatnot. So quarry Z equals quarry Z plus 1. Yes, yes. So in that, or actually we need to do an else if, because there's another thing it needs to do. It needs to check if quarry Z is greater, or sorry, less than the max length. Don't worry, these variables will be initialized later. We don't really need to worry about it for these functions since they're global variables. If we initialize them at a later date, then it's all hunky-dory. We just have to make sure we initialize them, which would be a very good thing to do. So else if the quarry Z is less than it, it means we can go forward. Which when we go forward, it happens to add 1 to the quarry length anyways, so it kind of saves it. So now we have to do function backward test. So kind of same thing. If it's terminated by the test inventory being not full, it will then check if quarry Z equals, here's the thing. Since it's the other way, basically it's trying to go backwards. Say this is forward. It's trying to go backwards. It'll reach this point and see it'll currently be at 2 with how it works. So when it goes first, it'll be 1, then 2, then it'll increase to 3. So it'll be 3 here. Then it'll be 2. So if it's equal to 2, we want it to equal 1 afterwards. So if it's equal to 2, then what we'll do subtract 1 from it. I could have it equal to 1, but where's the fun in that? Otherwise, if the quarry Z is greater than 2, so if it's not on that final run, it will go backwards instead. And there you go. Bob's your uncle and all that. Okay. So now that we got that done, let's straighten out some paper, so we might as well do some other stuff. We need to have some functions that will have it go full forward and full backwards. Where's the sun? We're almost there. So full forward will basically test the inventory again. I know, it's testing it a lot. So test the inventory, and while quarry Z is less than or equal to the max length, what it'll do is check if quarry Z... Okay, here's where explanation should come into effect. So basically, it'll check if it's reached the farthest point. So if it reached the farthest point, or actually, no, that's not what it's doing. What this is doing is, while it hasn't reached its farthest point, what it'll do is check if it needs to go left or it needs to go right. And I did that backwards. If it needs to go left or it needs to go right. Better now. So what it does is it checks its Z, quarry Z position. So right now it's 1. If it's 1, it'll go this way. So the modulus 2 actually divides it by 2, since it's an integer, and returns the remainder. So say 5 divided by 2 is 2 with a remainder of 1. So it'll return a 1. So if this is equal to 0, what it'll do is go full backwards. Not full backwards. What am I doing? Left. It'll go left. But it needs to do two things. It'll need to do left F and then do the... where am I? It's called left test. Yes, it'll need to do the left test, so go fully left. And then it'll need to do the forward test. It needs to be tested. Otherwise, what it'll do is do the right test and do the forward test. Okay, so after that's done, what it needs to do is check, is my spacing right? Okay, the while loop is done, and yes, I need to do an end here. Speaking about ends. Okay, so after it gets to the end of that very, very, very long loop, what it'll do is check if the quarry Z is greater than the max length. So if it's 3, where the max length is 2, what it'll do is, by the very end, it'll go down. And when it goes down, it'll add 1 to that Y position, which will be used in a later date. Now that we have the full forward, we need to do the full backwards. I might as well save this. So, oops. So pretty much the same thing. While test inventory, so while there's space in the inventory and the quarry Z is greater than 1, what I will do is check the modulus again. So when it checks the modulus this time, what it'll do is, right now it's 3 at this point, so it needs to go right, but when it's 2, it's an even, therefore modulus of it is 0, it'll go left. So when it's when it's equal to 0, it'll go left test and backward test. It needs to get tested. Sorry, did I do back test or backward test? Backward test. Good. So if I can manage to not do so many punny jokes, it's else it'll need to do right test and then do backward test. Probably can optimize the code later, but for now we gotta get this working. So then it'll test if the quarry Z is less than 2. That means if it's 1, what it'll do is then go down. Okay, let's save that. Whew. This is really taxing, I must say. Okay, do I have any levers? No. Okay. So say there's a lever here. So say we have some sort of base where the base of operation for the quarry thingy. So we have the chest here. We have another coal chest here, which gets some of the items, but we can focus on that later. And we have a redstone input that goes here on top of it. So it'll basically need... It's our representation of the kill switch. Since we can't really wirelessly connect to it, at least with this code, we cannot wirelessly connect to it, we'll need to basically check if when it finally returns back to base, if it can, go back to base. Okay, so what it'll do is we'll make a function similar to the one we had before called resume, similar to our red power quarry. So what resume will do is basically do while there is no redstone on top of me, not rs.getInput, while there's no redstone above me, and while Way cannot spell or get the code correct at all, what I'll do is move.goTo. Okay. So what resume does is it basically starts at the current position that you are on right now. So you place down the quarry, then say, "Go get him, tiger." So then what it does is it tells it to go to the last place I went to, which is our last X and our last Z. And then it'll need to do the move.elevate with our last Y. Why, do you ask? I don't know. So it'll need to continue to do that. So that's just the initial thing. And then it'll do its loop, a while loop, saying while the test inventory, while there's room in my inventory and the quarry height is less than or equal to the maximum depth of the quarry, what I want you to do is check the quarry Y with respect to modulus 2. And if it's equal to 0, not 0, 0, I'll want you to do full backward. So it starts as a 1. Quarry Y starts as a 1, so it'll start here and then go forward. Then when it's 2, it'll go backwards and rinse and repeat. So full backward. Otherwise, what we'll do is full forward. And to keep it clean, end. So if not, so basically it's going to have to test the inventory. So if, let's see, how can we do this? So if this time it's ended by its test inventory, so if test inventory is false, it'll save the current position to our last X, last Y, and last Z. This is where those come in. End. So now that's done. What it'll then do is so basically there's only two ways to break out of this where are we? Oh, this loop. Wait a second, I forgot an end. So bring those up. Oops. Enter. And I am failing miserably. There we go. There we go. So I need to stagger this, add another end, and there's no way to go back, is there? Anyways. End there, and there's an end. Where am I going wrong? There we go. End right there. So the only way to break out this loop is if the inventory is full or if it's finished its quarry. So if its inventory is full, which is here, it'll save its current position. But either way, what it'll do is it'll go back to its current position, or back to where it was, which was the chest place, and dump all of the inventory. So what it'll do is elevate to our chest Y, and then what it'll do is it'll basically retrace its path. So what it'll want to do is go along the X-axis first, and then just do its last x, last z, and then it'll go along the x-axis, z-axis rather. Go to chest x, chest z. So once it's there, it'll dump the inventory. And once I dump the inventory, it'll basically check its fuel level. And if it's less than 3,000, just some number that doesn't really have any importance, it'll turn which direction? It'll need to turn to its right, because we have that as its position, but that doesn't really matter. So right is 1. It'll turn to 1, and it'll suck up 1 item. Then it'll just refuel. That's good. And then it'll end. And then it'll end. And then it's all over. Okay. So there's one more thing we're going to need to do. We're going to need to be able to, well, two more things. We need to initialize the start, or the quarry, by inputting its start. Yes. What we should do is what we wanted to do is basically save where it is right now to go as the chest inventory. So where I'm placing it is where I'm placing my chest. So we'll want to input also, what we're inputting is basically where do I want to start corner-wise. So we'll start as this corner. So first, the chest x equals current x, the chest y equals current y, and the chest z equals current z. Now, the last position, basically last position in the quarry's eye, where it'll start to, if you remember the resume command way up here, it basically starts with going to the last position. So if we have it go to the initial position, it'll be easy. Y equals y, last z equal z. Now we are going to initialize the quarry. Good, and now we'll move by forcing a go to the last x position and the last z position. And we'll move dot force elevate to last y. And then we'll do the resume. End. Whew. That's quite a bit. Oh, we should also do some other thing. Now that I think of it, this isn't in my notes, but I think it would probably be a very good... What am I doing? There we go. Okay. Can you stop being annoying? I don't know if that's even possible for you, but stop. There we go. Okay. Go over twice, and let's start with this. Basically, I want to be able to do an if statement. I want to check the input that it is, just in case the kill switch is on. And if it is, what I want to do is just return saying you're an idiot. which I think would be pretty much affable. But we also want to basically have it refuel itself. Which is basically just repeating what we had before. And I think that is good. So end this, and I think it works. Now we need to do one more thing, which is very obvious. So save that. Last function. Dimensions. Length, width, depth. And if you don't know what these are, well, feel ashamed. Our max length equals length. Max width equals width. And our max depth equals depth. End. Save. Okay. That's a lot. So let's check by just doing quarry. Okay, so it means that line 100 then is a problem. Let's check line 100. It's expecting a then. So probably an if statement missing a then. Yes, it is. And another idiotic thing, 156, so at line 155, it's expecting a then, and it's not receiving it. Finally, quarry. Okay, so everything seems to be working. So what we'll do is, we have it saved, and Control-T does shut everything down if it's wrong. So what we'll do is Lua, and what we'll do is actually get a few chests. So once I get a few chests, we'll see if it works. Okay, so I have quite a few chests with me right now, and I don't have any sort of redstone, so I think just chopping down one log, getting a stick, and etc. should be good enough. Feel my love. Okay, good. Now let's go over here, put everything down, and see if everything's working. So here, we'll need to get this here again, put that there, and load the APIs. os.load API, move, good. os.load API, quarry. Okay, now we gotta see the current position of our quarry. So we'll need to subtract 2 from this current value. -120, 65, 260. -120, 65, 260, and its current direction is 1. So we'll entomb that and do move.set position. Good. Now we'll do a quarry dimensions. So quarry dot dimensions, and we'll do a length of 2, width of 2, depth of 2, just as a test basis. Good, and what shall we do? We need to start it. So starting position of where? -120, -270. So -120, 64, -270. 270. Ah, fudge. Let's do that again. Negative 120, 64, 270. We'll entomb that. And quarry dot start. Now we'll try with that. And obviously it indexed a nil value. So let's try seeing if not having that will do the same thing. So index is a nil value. I'm not sure what value. Oh, derp. You'd think I'd be smart enough. Okay, at 155 it's indexing a nil value. We should check what that is. So we'll have to exit the editor. Trapped in a hole, aren't I? You'd think I'd bring a bed by now. There you go, Way, cutting yourself off again. I am very, very, very finicky with my stop recording button. For Sparta, and all that. Okay, so let's check. So at 155, it's indexing a nil value. So that means I haven't initialized a particular thing. 155. Okay, let's see if this works. os.load API. Sorry, quarry. And obviously I have to reinitialize everything, so let's do that. And let's just do this. Invalid side. So obviously up is an invalid side. Let's actually check. So let's see. rs.getInput up is an invalid side. Top. Good. So top is what we need. So let's just edit that quickly. So probably the third time, let's do this. Have it killed for now. Once again, of invalid side, so obviously I didn't load the API. Okay. API. Quarry. Good, so we need to do everything again. Starting, so it's false. So it says you're an idiot. Stop doing that. Now we try it again, and it'll continue checking until it gets enough fuel. I should probably do the calculation to see what's enough fuel. Yep, there we go. Now it's stopped. Great. Great, great, great. It says it's an invalid side, 128. So obviously something is... Oh, it's still checking if it's at the top or stuff like that. Okay. Does resume do anything? It's still an invalid side, so I have to edit that, return it to its original position, and go like that. So I have to find all instances of rs.getInput and change them to top instead. This will be great. Okay, we're back, so let's just move this back to its original position, then start it. So, -65, good, and now move.go to -120 to 60. That'll return it to its original position. There you go, little turtle. And now let's try this again, probably the final time. This is why you've tried to test your code instead of just going jumble, 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 because that's not exactly the best anyways. So, and let's give it an obstacle that it has to go. Quarry dot start, thank you. And let's give it an obstacle, shall we? Just for fun. There we go. My little quarry bot. What the heck? Evidently, I do not know how turtle.getItemCount actually works. So now I have to edit quarry again and do this for the umpteenth time. So I don't even need to do turtle select 16 because I can just put 16 there, but I guess it doesn't really matter. Okay, I actually finally got it to work after no more hiccups, but it's working at least, so we'll see how this goes. Obviously, there's some sort of infinite loop involved, which is odd. That's for sure. Ah, now at least I know what the issue for that is. So, I think I'm going to fix that at a later date. I'll see what I can do at that point, but it's probably something that I won't be able to do right now. But we'll just see if the rest of it works. If it does, oh well. Okay. So, I think that's all of the time we have for this episode of EEPower. If you like what you see, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe to future episodes. I'm going to look at every single computer problem that I can possibly think of for this and rectify them by the time we continue next time. WayofTime here, signing off. Have a wonderful day.